The Queen is dead. Long live the King. Yesterday I saw Camilla speaking about Her late Majesty. She said that she proposed the name Elizabeth the Constant, as in Alfred the Great, Richard the Lionheart, Elizabeth the Constant, which I thought was very good. And I thought, could be better that. And to begin with, I thought I would propose Elizabeth the Best, because she really was, as Tina Turner would say, simply the best, wasn't she? The best of British, the best example, the best sovereign that anybody could hope for. Plucked with divine fingers, or so it seems. But eventually I settled on Elizabeth the Loved, because she was so loved. The most famous woman in the world. And the most famous human beings on earth aren't always the most loved, but it's hard to imagine and think of someone who isn't a deity that is as revered and as loved as she was. So after she died, I spent the evening in quiet repose, a sort of meditation, if you will, in prayer. I took away from the tellies and the onlines and all of that, and allowed the news to sink in, and I grieved. I grieved. But as I grieved, I realised that I'd done most of my grieving during the Platinum Jubilee. I don't know if you remember, but I could not stop crying throughout every day leading up to it, through it, and beyond it for a few days, watching over and over again everybody clamouring to sing God Save the Queen, and knowing it would probably be her final performance on the balcony. I did my grieving then. And although we've all known that what was inevitable and what was surely to take place this year, it was the knowledge that her mother went on to such a grand age of 101 that made us feel like we'd get those few more years out of the Queen. You know, because she seemed even more hale and hearty until recent years, when her health took such a dip. But because I took yesterday to light that candle, spend some prayerful time in silence and reflect, today I've woken with some joy in my heart and an acceptance that now is the time and the age of King Charles III, who's confirmed his regnal name. I know lots of us were hoping for perhaps a King Arthur, which he was entitled to use, and I thought he might have done, being a bit of a romantic. But we have King Charles, and that man has earned his stripes. He will never be able to forget the goings-on of his first marriage and all the unpleasantness that unfolded, mistakes he may or may not have made. He will never be able to get beyond that in some people's eyes. He is a fine man. He will make a fine king, and we are so lucky to have somebody who has, remember this, you must remember this, my dears, devoted his whole life to our nation as Prince of Wales. He was invested as Prince of Wales at 21. Younger than the Queen was when she became Queen. And it's been no light work being the Prince of Wales and performing in that role all these years, a constant at Her Majesty's side. She couldn't have wished for a more devoted son. And we've all seen what a devoted son does and doesn't look like over the last few years. Somebody who puts their parents and their parents' destiny and fated role before their needs and wants, for so many decades. And I am very proud of Charles, and just because he is a flawed human being like most of us, it doesn't mean that I think any less of him. Charles is the oldest monarch to ever take the throne. The oldest monarch, the longest serving heir apparent. Imagine that, all your life, 73 years, an heir. The age where most people want to shuffle off and retire. Not speaking for everybody, but you understand most people aren't coming to grips with the fact that at 73 years old, now you take the mantle for the role that you were destined for. I also think that had Her late Majesty gone on for another 5 years, that it would have been grossly unfair on Charles, who in everything but name would have been a Prince Regent, moving from a soft regency to a king in all but name. So the Queen had a fabulous life, full of joy and glamour and drama and the ups and downs, and a great love from a young age. It was full of magic and beauty, as well as all the years of hard work and dedication. It was fun. She had a fun time. She knew how to squeeze the juice and the joy out of life. And she wouldn't be moping around today. Not saying that we can't take the appropriate time, however long it is, to grieve and feel bereavements, but she would be saying, get outside with the corgis, get outside, get some fresh air, open a window, have a good cry if you need to in the wind. But don't wallow. Don't wallow. Let's not get mawkish. I'm the most guilty out of everybody for sentimentality and reflecting on the past, but I am absolutely taking the lessons that I've learned from Her Majesty's reign and from Prince Philip to be upward and outward looking as much as possible, and to embrace this change, because without this sort of change, things become stagnant. And as nice as it may have been in some ways, another 5 years of the Queen's reign, I've come to realise, would have begun, well, I'm not going to use that word, but it would have been difficult. I feel my fruits. I'm sure you know what I'm getting at. But there's no denying that it does feel like a rather peculiar episode of Doctor Who. I've never been a fan of Doctor Who, but I'm aware what happens. He enters the TARDIS and moves around from location to location, transmogrifying, and it feels like Her Majesty looked at us in that oh so poignant last official photograph at Balmoral during the Liz Truss meeting. That photograph of her alone. I can't quite tell if she's looking directly at camera or off to the side to greet Liz Truss, but that look, it is absolutely perfect. It's as if she's saying to us, no regrets, I'll be seeing you. Well, that was fun, wasn't it? You know, I can't think of the right words, but it's just the look that sums it up, isn't it? She's like, there we go. There we are, my dears. There we are, my fruits. Be seeing ya. Oh, don't set me off. No, I've done my makeup. Oh, lordy. We don't show our emotions in public, my dear. I know I'm going to get cry. Have a good cry, show us your feelings, everything like that. It's not necessary. You know my feelings. And the Queen reminds us of the era of the English reserve, the stiff upper lip. And while I'm a great fan of expressing emotions, privately and to some extent publicly, I am not a fan of the new way of overflowing tears and emotions in public all the time. And if that's your way, and that's absolutely fine. But I admire the Queen's way, and that will just always be something that is rooted in my heart, and is what I will look to follow. She set such a good example. But she transmogrified, and in her place we have Charles. We have Charles, who is no longer the Duke of Cornwall. William and Catherine is now even more of a mouthful, my dears, because they are now the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall and Cambridge. God, I have to think about it every time. The Duke of Cornwall and Cambridge. So, thankfully, I just call him Big Willie, which helps. it might help going forward, but bring on the Prince of Wales, because the Prince of Wales is now a vacant incumbency. There is no Prince of Wales, because that's not a hereditary title. That is gifted on approval of the monarch. But I'm sure in good time, hopefully soon as possible, Charles will invest Prince William as the Prince of Wales. But in the meantime, he remains a duke, and as the Duke of Cornwall, he is also now Duke of the Duchy of Cornwall. So that has been passed to William, which is again a huge undertaking, and something that has been one of Prince Charles's tapestries, one of his life's great works. You know, it's not as if he's been idling around writing memoirs, and no, we won't go there yet. It'll come though, my dears. I'm trying to be semi-respectful and withhold a little bit today, because it's very fresh and raw, and a certain grandson has lost his grandmother. But that doesn't mean that I'll be holding back over the next week. Camilla is Queen Consort, and I shall be referring to her as the Queen throughout the rest of my broadcasts. There's no need to come out with the whole shebang every time we mention her. And she is everything that a king would want in a wife. Self-effacing. Not ambitious, not publicity seeking. Her only ambition is to support her husband, who she loves, and do the right thing by him and the royal family. So I'm thrilled that Her Majesty was deft enough and skillful enough to make the subtle move of giving her blessing before she died, because the matter is settled. Today in the newspapers we are not asking the question, what will Camilla be? There aren't voices of disapproval or dissent. Well, I haven't looked that deeply, but I haven't heard any so far. That is Her Majesty's work. Her Majesty approved, so who's anybody else to disapprove? The new king's grandchildren inherited the technical right to call themselves Prince and Princess, and I'm speaking about Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. That right always existed, and by letters patent set out by King George, it was always going to be the way. It was always going to be the way. Unless we forget, it was Meghan Markle that laid down bare on international television, complaining to Oprah Winfrey that the royal family, due to their racism and their bigotry, as was implied, had deprived Archie and Lilibet of their titles. Almost immediately this was shot down by the wider world, who knew and understood that this was simply protocol, nothing unusual and nothing sinister. To this day there has been no retraction, no public apology, no making amends. Maybe that'll be in the memoir, but I doubt it. Prince Charles has the power to adjust this with new letters patent. If I were him, I would do it. I would do it. And it's very sad, because Archie and Lilibet are the grandchildren of King Charles and deserve those princely ranks and titles. However, because of their own parents' behaviour, the fact that Lilibet was born overseas, she wasn't even born in the kingdom or a Commonwealth realm, do not know the family, have no intention of working as members of the royal family, I see no reason why the right to call themselves Prince and Princess should exist in the future, and that's how I feel about it. We'll see what King Charles comes up with, won't we? We will find out over the coming days and weeks Charles' intentions, to see how the king is going to shape the monarchy the way he sees fit. This is his time, and as much as we hope that he takes a lot of signalling and a lot of cues from her late Majesty's reign, it is absolutely right that he should do things his way, that he should trust his instincts and adopt his own style, as every monarch in history has. We have been indulged with a 70-year reign, so it's what we know. I heard people saying on the news, to put things in perspective, that Her Majesty's reign covers 30% of the entire history of America. 30% of America's history has been embraced by the Queen's reign. One thing that does concern me, and I've mentioned it before about the King, image-wise, is the fact that he does have a rather natural Eeyore expression. You can even see it in him as a child. So always looks as he did during the Queen's speech last year when her late Majesty was absent and he sat in for her. It's this sort of hangdog Eeyore expression, and with a funeral coming up, it's quite understandable. But I hope he tries to snap out of it a bit. That might sound a bit unreasonable, but we need to see him looking sort of fresh, as inscrutable as possible, as the Queen did such a good job of doing, and not too emotionally downbeat some of the time, because that is not Charles at all. You know, he has a fabulous humour, he's wry, a little mischievous, especially when Camilla's around, and there's a lot of joy there, but it's not always expressed in photographs. I've enjoyed very much the simplicity of the imaging when it's come down to the statement that was posted to the gates of Buckingham Palace. The simplicity of royal statements is something that I find so beautiful, and I think it compares favourably to other ways, other methods in other quarters. So beautifully stated, so simply. It's elegant. Even on social media, trashy old social media, it is to the point, nothing superfluous, nothing gushy, and rather practical. The crown has passed. Quite simply, the crown has passed. I want you to know that the Queen was full of life and full of joy to the end. By the way, I believe that she died with Charles and Anne at her bedside. Her other children had yet to reach Balmoral. She died surrounded by a loving son and a loving daughter in a loving home. And to the last, she was full of joy. She was fully with it. She spent the weekend with the Reverend Greenshields, who was invited to Balmoral, and he was invited to give a sermon at the church that she usually would worship at. And he came to stay at Balmoral just this weekend, just gone, just a few days, to spend time with the Queen. He stayed overnight. He had dinner with her on the Saturday. He had lunch with her on the Sunday. Anne and Charles were also present. And he said she was sharp as a tack, funny, invested in everything. He said she was the life and soul. She was on good form. She wasn't twitching about in spasmodic, excruciating pain. She was absolutely switched on. Talking about Ukraine, talking about what's going on currently. He said she was full of sort of belly laughter, genuine laughter, he said. She was genuinely laughing. She had the sense that she was constantly trying to bring people together. This weekend, bringing people together, bringing the family together. It was much about that. She was great company, so, you know, it's nice to know. And another local reverend stayed at Balmoral the weekend before. Not this one gone, but the weekend before she died. Another one was there because people must remember, and he said, you know, her life and that weekend was very much talk of faith. And, you know, I always hesitate to bring up anything too religious, and especially because I'm conscious that we have people of all faiths and none around, but why shouldn't I talk about it? You know, when you're speaking about the Queen and understanding her, that is what she put first. Because here on earth, the buck stopped with her. And when I was in conversation with one of the Queen's grandson's godparents recently, he spoke about how lonely it is for the Queen and how awesome the feeling must be for her to know that the buck stops with her. I'm paraphrasing, these are my words, but you know, it stops with her. There's only one being, or supernatural being, that she can go to for her sustenance, for her support, above the crown, which is God, and in her case the Christian God. And her Christianity defined her life. It defined everything about her. It's an important part of her story as defender of the faith, religion can be used as an excuse for evil, and religion can be used to beautify a life. And we saw that shining from the Queen in her kindness, her compassion, her reaction, her non-reactions. And no matter what your faith, lessons can be drawn from that. I shan't go through all the glories that are being bestowed upon Her late Majesty by world leaders, but suffice to say, it's very touching, very moving to see how much she was admired and respected. You know, she made us all feel so proud of our nation, even at times when there probably wasn't that much to be proud about, you know. I'm sure that's very noticeable to the rest of the world, that she was our pride. How can you not be proud of a sovereign like Her Majesty? Her late Majesty? You know, how can you not? But President Biden issued a rare proclamation to fly all American flags at half-mast, not just at the White House, but at embassies, military bases, all the rest of it, government buildings, as a mark of respect to unmatched dignity and constancy. Matchless dignity would have been more elegant. That's just a note to the speechwriter. Unmatched dignity and constancy, who deepened the bedrock alliance between the United Kingdom and the United States. So I appreciated that gesture. There will be a 2-minute silence on Monday. And actually, I thought it was my imagination at first, but it's true. The streets here are quieter. I guess everybody's inside, glued to the television or the internet or their phones, you know. But it is perceptibly quieter here. So the plan for what happens after the Queen's death is in full flow. Operation London Bridge, and it also encompasses Operation Unicorn, which is the name for the plan if the Queen was to have died in Scotland, which of course she did. So have Operation London Bridge and Operation Unicorn, which throws some more logistics into the mix. That's all underway, of course. This is decades in the making, so there will be some additional ceremonial events in Edinburgh. And the period of royal mourning will last until 7 days after the Queen's funeral. And at the time of recording, that hasn't been announced, but I'm sure by the time it's out, or this evening it will be. The King is scheduled to address the nation at 6 p.m. tonight, GMT. He will meet with the Prime Minister, his first Prime Minister, today. Members of the royal family will wear black cloth or crepe bands on their arm to signify the mourning period. The Queen will lie in state for 4 days, I think it is, at Westminster Hall for 23 hours a day, so that hundreds of thousands of mourners can shuffle past and pay their respects to Her Majesty's coffin. And weren't those images absolutely beautiful of a double rainbow that appeared more or less at the time of the late Queen's death? They appeared over Buckingham Palace. A double rainbow appeared. I like to think that one of them represented her queendom and one represented her humanity. A wonderful double rainbow there. Couldn't have been timed any better, could it? I hesitate to mention him because it's not like he deserves any airtime, my dear, so don't get the wrong idea. But even I just wanted to illustrate the power of royalty, the soft power that it possesses. And I think this is as strongest way possible to do it. Putin has expressed his condolences, and he sent a message to Charles. For those of you that don't know, he knew the Queen. She received him for a state visit a couple of decades ago, I think, and he was charmed and enamoured by her and the family. He said the Queen commanded love, respect and authority on a world stage. To Charles he said, I wish you courage and resilience in the face of this difficult, irreparable loss. May I ask you to pass on sincere condolences and support to members of the royal family and the entire people of Great Britain. And for those of you who might say, well, why do you want those condolences? Why do you care what he thinks or says? And you know, he doesn't deserve this kind of attention for saying such a thing. You're missing the point. You're missing the point. The point is that under a monarchy, under a kingdom, because we are now truly a kingdom rather than a queendom. Funny to think, isn't it? You know, under a kingdom, I cherish the fact that we have this neutral head of state. I think it is very powerful, who is separate from their government. Separate. They are a cipher. The sovereign is not a political commentator, and there is such power in that. They don't get dragged into various sides. Yes, they're on the side of the nation, but there is such a power in biting one's lip and holding one's tongue at certain times, because it's hard to describe to people abroad, but for many of us here in the nation, the royal family give us that sense of safety, because as much as Boris Johnson might have antagonised the likes of Putin, the likes of Liz Truss antagonises Putin, and you might think, well, he might get a bit bomb happy and not be too discerning about where all kinds of nastiness might end up if he was to initiate something truly evil. The presence of the royal family is a deterrent in itself, especially when they have forged links with various families, and dynasties and other royal families and world leaders, state leaders. No matter whether they are these leaders are a force for good or a force of evil, it is a strengthening of relationships, and I believe it is a deterrent, and I believe it can soften a harsh view on our nation. You know, it's that soft, invisible embrace that we all have woken up today and feel that we have lost, but that will be regenerated over the next few weeks as we come to know Charles as a king. He has been restrained for so many years, not saying that he was desperate and eager to break free, but he has been told since he was young enough to understand what his destiny is, and for decades he has waited. He has waited for this moment to be crowned. For those of you that are curious, the coronation is probably many months away. I should think well after the winter, but who knows? It's not something that happens immediately. His kingship, his sovereignty is immediate. As soon as the Queen gasped her last breath, he became king. He was king. It's poignant, it's romantic, it's dramatic. Today that is officiated via the Privy Council, and his kingship will be officially proclaimed, but as his birthright, that is his. He is king. But now is his time, and I hope that the world allows the king to unfold before us, to take charge. He has always understood that the role of the sovereign is different. You know, he's taken a lot of flack and a lot of criticism, sometimes fairly, sometimes unfairly, for expressing certain views here and there. But in fairness to him, he has always said that he understands the difference between the role of the Prince of Wales and the role of the sovereign, and that when the time came, he would fulfill that neutral role. So one has to have a bit of understanding for that, a bit of understanding that he's also a human being, and an appreciation for all the hard work he's done and will continue to do, because today is the first full day of his kingship after all these years. So from today, we'll see what he's made of. And it's pretty thin on the top, because he can only rely on his son, who is to be the Prince of Wales. There are no extraneous characters. You know, there aren't 4 children like Her late Majesty had. There's one. There's one left. I think I'm going to wrap that up today. I'm sure I'll be coming to you with some different flavours over the next few days. But I have someone to look after myself. I've mentioned to you before my great aunt, who's in her dotage. She's a few years younger than the Queen, but she's in her 90s. And she is very much like the Queen, you know. And sadly, she's losing her marbles, and she loses more and more marbles out of the pouch every week. And it's one of my duties this week because my mother is out of the country, as usual. Bless her, she loves to travel, does my mother. She's out of the country, which is rather bad timing. And my great aunt, who lives with my parents. So it is my duty, along with my siblings, to keep her company, let's put it that way, especially on the quieter evenings. And I know she's been watching everything royal that's going on and paying a lot of close attention to that. So I'm going to spend some time with her this evening, and I hope that you go on to have a nice evening and come to terms with what's happened in your own way. But thank you for listening to my way, and stay royal, won't you, my dears? Channel the royal spirit. Have a good cry if you need to, but stay royal. She really taught us well how to do that, didn't she? Wow. Very lucky and blessed to grow up under the reign of Elizabeth Regina. And now we move into the age of Charles Rex. Thank you most sincerely for all the absolutely fabulous comments you've left. I appreciate your time, your engagement, and thank you to those of you who sent me a tip. The tip jar is below if you'd like to treat me to a stiff gin and Dubonnet. But thank you for your time. And what more can I say? God save His Gracious Majesty, King Charles III, King of the United Kingdom, King of Antigua and Barbuda, King of the Bahamas, King of Belize, King of Grenada, King of Jamaica, King of Papua New Guinea, King of St. Kitts and Nevis, King of St. Lucia, King of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, King of the Solomon Islands, King of Tuvalu, King of New Zealand, King of Australia, and King of Canada, and devoted son of Elizabeth the Loved, Charles.